About 50 years ago, an astronaut returning from the moon experienced things that he couldn't find a scientific explanation for. So, with some colleagues, he launched a new science focused on the mind and how it works in the body and across space and time. It's the field of Noetics, where the tools of modern science are used to help us understand how what we think and feel affects us and the world around us. Now, this is Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments from the studios of KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon.
This is Noetic Moments, where we explore the field of research that discovers what consciousness is, what it does, how it works, and how our lives could be very different if we understood it better. I'm Ruth Miller, a longtime student of consciousness, along with cybernetics and anthropology, and through this series of programs, I'm introducing some of the people whose work has defined the field of research, and I'm explaining some of their ideas and experiments. I'll also explore some relevant news items and answer questions that you send to my email address, ruth@noeticmoments.org. And Noetic is spelled Noetic. Well, since we began this program, we focused on the various models that people have developed to explain our experience and the experiments that have supported those models. From the earliest scientific explorations over 100 years ago, we learned that most of what goes on in the mind is not in our conscious awareness at all, but goes on in unconscious processes. From those early researchers, we learned that our minds can be thought of as having three aspects. What we're aware of, we've been calling that our personal awareness. What we aren't aware of that's keeping our bodies going and also includes our fears and beliefs about potential threats and dangers, and we've been calling that the individual subconscious. And what we aren't aware of that enlivens our being and guides us in our actions, which we've been calling the individual superconscious. From that, we went on to later research in which we learned that we can change our state of consciousness and shift what aspects of the mind we are aware of and what we're capable of in the moment. And we learned that it's possible to say where in the brain various processes are active, but no one has yet been able to demonstrate where memories are actually stored or what the pathway is by which ideas and thoughts come into being. We've seen that the responses in our body to both our individual mental activity and what's going on around us happen far faster than nerve impulses or chemicals can travel through the body. That suggests that who and what we are, our consciousness, and our decisions and choices aren't all originating in the brain. As a result, many scientists have come to accept that what we call mind is not the product of the electrochemical activity of the brain, but is, in fact, the activity of a kind of field that surrounds and permeates the whole body. Some researchers and shamans have suggested that this field looks like a glowing egg shape extending from below our knees to a few inches above our heads. And this field appears to be at least partly electromagnetic. It's possible to measure electromagnetic activity for several inches and even several feet around the body. These researchers suggest that the brain is best understood as a receiver-transmitter. It receives messages from the mind and transmits them to the body. And it receives messages from the senses and transmits them to the body and the mind. We also learned that the brain modifies whatever it receives, from both the senses and the mind, to fit past patterns of experience that are stored as hardwired connections among the neurons. According to Begg's principle, that neurons that fire together wire together, which means that we see and hear and feel what we expect or believe we will experience. Other experiments we looked at demonstrated that what we call the individual mind continues to perceive and process for as much as several hours, even when the brain and heart are flatlined and the person has been declared dead. This may explain why most reports from those who've been through such experiences do not fit the past patterns of expectation that are stored in their brain's neuronal connections. Their brain isn't involved in this process. Mind, then, can be considered a field, a pattern of energy that exists during and after the body is functioning, the superconscious. It permeates and develops with the body and brain as the subconscious and is being told by the sensory parts of the brain what the world out there is like, our personal awareness. Now, every field is a unique pattern of vibration that's different from other fields, and some experiments have demonstrated that people, and some animals, have minds that are vibrating along similar patterns. That is, they resonate with each other. Such resonant minds are able to sense when the other is focusing attention on them or is about to come home. Their bodies have been measured to change in subtle ways when someone they're connected with turns attention their way, even though they can't be seen or heard. Seeing all of this, we begin to understand how bodies and environments shift and change as people change their thought processes, what they're focusing on in the personal awareness of their consciousness. It also explains the effectiveness of mental or spiritual healing and what's called the placebo effect, how the belief of the care provider and patient in a treatment can help a patient receiving that treatment experience healing. And we've learned that mind affects matter in a variety of ways. In the famous double-slit experiments in quantum physics where the subatomic building blocks of the universe show up as matter or energy depending on whether a mind is present to observe them. Or in the collective mind that has been demonstrated to change the readouts on random number generators in the network of computers run by the Global Consciousness Project. Because of the nature of fields and because of things like the Global Consciousness Project, a growing number of scientists are seeing our individual field of mind as part of a larger field, a global brain or noosphere, or, in Carl Jung's terms from 100 years ago, a collective consciousness. And more scientists are equating that larger field with the quantum or zero-point field, out of which all matter and energy arises in this orderly system we call the universe. Ervin Laszlo calls this zero-point or quantum field the Akashic field, using a Sanskrit term that means the essence of everything that exists in the material world. It relates closely to David Bohm's concept of the implicate order. And drawing on David Bohm's work, some scientists are beginning to use the equations that describe physics to describe the role of consciousness in the formation of our material world. Based on all of that, we began some more popular explorations in how the mind works, including the way the world around us reflects what we've been focusing on in what's often called the law of attraction, the way we can access information in the quantum or Akashic field through insight, intuition, and the increasingly understood process of channeling, and through dreams and the dreaming process that affect the body and relate to our greater consciousness. You can catch up on our past shows on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where you'll also find links to the clips, books, and authors that I mention on the show. Today, we're going to shift gears a bit, and we're going to talk about music, particularly music and its effects on our consciousness. Now, we know that music has been something that humanity has been using for millions of years. We've found bird bone whistles in the ancient sites, and drums and other kinds of musical expression for almost as long as humanity has been on the planet. So the question becomes, what are the impacts on the mind, on the brain, on the consciousness of the individual and of the collective of all of this musical activity? Why do we want this? What does it do to us? Recently, a young woman growing up in the Americas growing up in North America, has been living in an ashram in India, so she has had an opportunity to step outside her normal music environment, and she has a fascinating YouTube exploring her experience, which I'll share a bit of with you now.
My brother and I were having a big discussion about this, actually, and he was sharing that one of his favorite bands, Other Lives, which is a really beautiful band, makes amazing music. But it's not necessarily about the most powerful thought currents. It's still talking a lot about depression and that kind of a thing. And so this is a band which he's listened to for years, and he said he actually started to see how even their lyrics of their songs were starting to happen physically in his life. Means like very specific lines from their songs were starting to actually manifest as his reality. Why? Because these are lyrics which he's repeated over and over again, probably thousands of times, for 5 to 6 years. When he was sharing this, it really hit me how much this is true, because it actually goes both ways, right? It's a cycle. Not only do the songs we listen to affect our reality, but from our space, whatever space we're in at the moment, we also seek music which is at that same frequency. So, for example, when I was in high school and I was still partying and I was, having lots of emotional issues, and my world really revolved around, boyfriends or friends and parties, all I listened to was rap and hip hop, and I loved it, and it gave me that energy of literally feeling like when I listened to a song, I wanted to go party. You guys might relate to this. The song in itself made me want to go drink alcohol, or made me want to go smoke, whatever it was. So the same way, when I started to get out of that world, I started to shift my taste in music. And probably you guys have experienced this too. I started to listen to more beautiful, conscious music, more bands that are about happiness and love, or just creating the world that you want to live in, like Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, one of my favorite bands. Fleet Foxes makes amazing, beautiful music also. But even them, still, there's some thought currents there which aren't necessarily ones I want to be constantly repeating in my life. But I was for so many years. So we have to be so aware about what we're listening to. And that's why, personally today, I only listen to really, almost all the time, all I listen to is Indian music, not just any Indian music, specifically Sanskrit or devotional songs that are in Tamil, Hindi, or Sanskrit and English. So all I'm filling my being with is just songs speaking about the divine and adoring the divine and being devoted to the divine, just invoking that space of bhakti and bliss for life and excitement and celebration of life. That's all I've realized fulfills me, and all I want to be repeating continuously as my manifesting reality. I don't want to be even repeating songs about just a romantic relationship or all these fake fantasies that we create about ourselves, even with a partner. Even those types of songs are not something I want to put in my consciousness constantly. So it's really interesting to look at, and even at the deeper level, to really see how we're being programmed. It is a very powerful system of programming the public with pop, specifically pop music, the most popular music that there is. If you start to analyze, I want you today to listen to the radio. Not just listen, but really deeply listen and look at what is the mantras that you're being told by the music industry, by society. And you'll see how frightening it actually is. So make sure that you're taking care of your being and what you're listening to. Listen to music which is something which you want to be programming your consciousness with, because whether you want to or not, it's going to be happening.
Whether we want it to or not, it's going to be happening. The music and the lyrics together work to impose ideas on our consciousness, to suggest and encourage different kinds of activities. Very wise words from a very young woman. And music has many other possibilities. Humanity has known about the therapeutic effects of music for centuries. For thousands of years, probably. We hear about Aesculapius in ancient Greece offering music as part of the healing process. And even the Bible, the Old Testament Hebrew Bible, highlights music, especially in stories like David playing the harp to soothe the soul of the king Saul. and we can see many songs throughout the scriptures. More recently, music therapy has become part of our lives. It's been used successfully with war veterans and with abuse victims. And thanamusicology is an emerging field where people are helping people who are in that process of leaving their bodies gently and lovingly with music. Music as therapy is also beginning to be applied for children. As children enter into playing with the musical instruments, it's a fun activity. And over time, they discover that it is more than just play. It is something that allows them to express emotions that maybe they can't express any other way. Two men have engaged in the exploration of music and consciousness at many levels and edited a book on music and consciousness that's full of scientific papers, and some of their papers are scattered around on the internet. You can find them. David Clark with an E and Eric Clark with an E. And one of the things that they say in one of their papers is what music is capable of providing, rather than communication, is communion. An intimately shared experience between listener and listener, and between listener and performer. We suggest that the mechanism of emotional contagion supports an experience of empathy in music listeners and offers some insights into the relationship between the underpinning neural processes and levels of consciousness. The mechanism of emotional contagion involving motor resonance experience at the pre-reflective level of consciousness without involvement of the reflective level of consciousness. Reflective level is what we've been calling the normal thought structure or personal awareness. So I'll say that again. The mechanism of emotional contagion involving motor resonance experience at the pre-reflective level without involvement of the reflective level of consciousness will not give rise to a sense of separate agency in the listener. Rather, the listener experiences an ambiguity of agency that fosters co-subjectivity. That is to say, a communion between the listener and the performer. It's hard to know who is the subject and what is the object. Now, to help us understand that a little better, I'm offering here a YouTube segment by a brain physiologist talking about what music does in the brain.
What makes human music so distinctive is our link between sound and motion, which is due to the connections in the human brain between the motor regions controlling our motion and the regions controlling hearing and sound, the auditory cortex. As a rule, the deeper you dive into the human brain, the more universal one's propensity for music and for emotion goes. If you start with the brainstem, our oldest layer, brainstems flinch to reflexes in sound, so shocks and loud bangs will trigger the brainstem reflex. The next layer up, the basal ganglia, responds to pleasure, whether a sound is pleasant or unpleasant. The amygdala is where emotions happen, sadness, happiness, anger, fear. And the most modern layer, the neocortex, is the point where you process patterns and the complexities of music. In terms of our music instinct, one of our faculties, which are inborn, is what has been called auditory scene analysis, or the cocktail party effect. If you go to a party and you're surrounded by people jabbering away in different simultaneous conversations, you have an astonishing capacity to tune in to a particular thread. It's the same faculty you have when you're listening to a line in a Bach fugue or in a jazz standard. We can focus our listening. Birds also have that. Infant and a father emperor penguin surrounded by 40,000 breeding pairs can hear each other's voice in this incredible hubbub. Appreciating music purely as a form of relaxation or entertainment does a massive disservice to all the things that music helps you with. The biggest draw to mental health is loneliness. Music can bring people together. You don't have to actively make music with somebody else. Just to listen to music plugs you into a social network, because every note of music is social. It's formed of social conventions. Music lowers stress by reducing cortisol. It gives you pleasure, makes you happy by flooding the brain with neurotransmitters like dopamine. Music is an excellent way of tagging memories, remembering, expressing your deepest emotions and your identity, which can't be captured by language, because music is far too precise for words. All these things increase your mental health, and ultimately music becomes a mode of mindfulness, of contemplation. It's not purely relaxing because there's too much going on when you're listening, and the word relaxation gives a sense of passivity, whereas to listen is a very active and creative activity.
Pretty powerful stuff, this music. Doing all kinds of things in the body. No wonder humanity has always followed some kind of musical process. And probably humanity has appreciated what the birds and the wind and the sounds of the rivers and the creeks were like and built on that. You know how wonderful it can feel to listen to a babbling brook or to hear the song of the robin after a rain, or for some people, the mourning doves in their cooing in the morning. So I can imagine humanity appreciating it happening out there might want to bring it in to wherever they are, whenever they are. And so would imitate it at first and begin to build on that, because we are fundamentally creative beings, are we not? And so music becomes fundamental to being human. Which brings me to the book we're going to be looking at today. It's called Music and the Mind by Anthony Storr. It was published about 1992 and has a number of fascinating chapters in it, but I want to read a piece that's directly relevant to what we were saying. It says, the human brain is first organized or programmed to respond to emotional, intonational aspects of the human voice. Since infants in the womb react both to unstructured noise and to music with movements which their mothers can feel, it seems likely that auditory perception prompts the baby's first realization that there is something beyond itself, to which it is nevertheless related. After the birth, vocal interchange between mother and infant continues to reinforce their mutual attachment, although vision soon becomes equally important. The crooning, cooing tones and rhythms which most mothers use when addressing their babies are initially more significant in cementing the relationship between them than the words which accompany those vocalizations. So, Music and the Mind by Anthony Storr is helping us understand that the sound, the relationships between the sounds and the intonations are fundamental to the relationship between any human being and any other human being. Music is an extension of that, isn't it? So that we're looking at relationship between sounds. We're looking at harmonies of intonation. In the book, he goes on to say, many people regard physical intimacy with another person as impossible to verbalize, deeper than anything which words can convey. Linguistic analysts distinguish stress, pitch, volume, emphasis, and any other features conveying emotional significance as opposed to grammatical structure or literal meaning. So, music in the mind, according to Anthony Storr, is actually where we are getting our information through the musical qualities. So something to play with when you are considering what it is that's actually being communicated. Is it the words, or is it the meaning being conveyed in the tone of the voice, in the harmonies? We all know how it feels when we hear those perfect harmonies and we just kind of soar. And we all know that some voices make it hard for us to hear what's actually being said. And we all know those voice tones and intonations that are disturbing and distressing because of past experiences with people using them. But I'm guessing that isn't just past experiences. It looks as if the brain is structured to receive certain kinds of information through the musical aspects. And it may be that the ancient Greek concept of the music of the spheres is actually the music of the mind that is who and what we truly are. Well, that's it for today's show. We're out of time today. The next time we get together, we'll look at more of the research being done in an attempt to understand what consciousness is, what it really does, and how we can experience life differently when we use it fully. And remember, you can continue this exploration on our website, www.noeticmoments.org, where there's a list of the titles and other resources we refer to on the show, along with archived past shows, and where you can send me your comments and questions, which I'll do my best to get answered the next time we're on the air. For now, thanks for joining me here on Noetic Moments, recorded in the studios of KXCR Community Radio in Florence, Oregon. And have a wonderful week.
You've been listening to Dr. Ruth Miller's Noetic Moments. This program is produced in the studios of KXCR Community Radio in beautiful Florence, Oregon, supported by you, our listeners. Our theme music is Tumbling Planets, composed and performed by Jeff Lovejoy. To hear this program again or learn more about Noetic sciences, search our website, www.noeticmoments.org.